All right, happy Monday, everybody. This is the newest edition of Bet March 6th edition. I am your host, Erin, Dolan. We have a packed show for you guys with a ton of guests. You guys need to stay tuned. But we're first going to bring in our first guest. We got Eric Moody on deck. And if you guys can only remember, football season was not that long ago. And Eric and I would do a show every Sunday giving picks on the NFL. But it has been a while since you've seen both of us on Bet. So, Eric, I first have to ask you, how are you doing and what's been going on since the football season?
No, I've been doing well. Hey, it's good to have the gang back together, but I will tell you, I'm still reeling from that Super Bowl loss by the Eagles. I was pulling for them, as you know. But, hey, it's obviously been busy with the NBA, and plus we got NFL free agency that's getting ready to start, so I'm very excited.
And let me tell you guys, Eric is one of the best people that I know because he's a Cowboys fan and he was still rooting for the Eagles. But we won't get into that. We have all of next season to talk about that. Let's start off with one of our favorite segments, reaction or no action. I'm going to read a statement, Eric, and you're going to tell me reaction or no action. The first one being, the Kings win the Pacific Division, currently plus 135 on Caesars Sportsbook. The favorite in the market is the Phoenix Suns at minus 130. Are you reaction or no action?
I'm going to go no action here. I really do like the Suns. They're favorites for a reason, I'd say. The addition of Kevin Durant is huge for this team. You've got Chris Paul, who's in the twilight of his career, and given his age and athleticism, he's able to act more as a facilitator, which I'm excited about. He's got Kevin Durant, he's got Devin Booker, two of the top jump shooters in the league. They also have DeAndre Ayton there as well. One thing about the Kings, their remaining schedule is a little bit tougher, I would say, than the Phoenix Suns. And also the Suns have two more games against the Kings and also the Nuggets. They win those games and the others, it's really going to put them in a position to win that division. So I am backing the Suns here.
This was a tough one for me to pick, but I'm going to go reaction on this one, and only because when you look at the strength of schedule for both of these teams. For the Kings, they're in the bottom 10 in the league in terms of strength of schedule, but for the Suns, they're in the top half. They're going to have to face teams like the Sixers, the Bucks, the Warriors, let alone the Kings, and they're still trying to figure all these different things out. Now, in the games that we've seen with Kevin Durant in a Suns uniform, they've looked really good. In fact, they're ranked 6th in offensive rating, 6th in defensive rating, which is also good, meaning that defense. I think that's really important down the stretch. But at the same time, they haven't faced the stiffest competition. We're talking OKC, we're talking the Bulls, we're talking about the Mavericks, which was a really good game yesterday. But at the same time, we know the theme with the Mavericks is that defense not being good. So as soon as they're pressed against some of these hard teams, it'll be interesting to see how they look. The Suns, by every means, they are a better team than the Kings, but there is a part of me that thinks that there is some value in this market. So I'm going to go reaction. All right, second statement. We are going to stay in the NBA. Celtics beat the Suns to win the NBA title. That is the exact market. It is 10-1, one of the lowest odds. Reaction or no action?
I'm going to go with no action again on this. Now, don't get me wrong. The Celtics started off the season hot. They haven't really lost momentum. Great on both ends of the floor. They rank 4th in both points scored per 100 possessions and also points allowed per 100 possessions. And although we've recently seen some cracks in the foundation for the Celtics, a great team. But the Suns, as I mentioned, are in a great spot with Kevin Durant. This is a team that is trending up. They're only going to get better. And one thing about the Celtics, with them making the NBA Finals last year and losing, on average it takes around 9 seasons for a team to get back to the NBA Finals after losing in around 12 and a half seasons to win the title. So I'm going to go with history there. No action for me on this one, Erin.
We're in agreement there. I'm also going no action on this one. I was really high on the Celtics the entire season, but it just feels like if you limit it to the East alone, let's say, the Bucks are starting to give them a run for their money. We know that 16-game win streak was snapped by the Sixers. I was in Philly for that game. It was amazing watching that on the big screen, but that's not the point. I just think other teams are still starting to get better than the Boston Celtics. And honestly, the Suns are an absolute threat. I know we've only seen 3 games with Kevin Durant in that lineup. Yes, they won all 3 of those. I already talked about it. Wasn't against the best competition, but at the same time, that team is really good with Kevin Durant on it. In fact, Katie and Devin Booker in the first 3 games, they've scored 188 combined points. That's incredible, not to mention plus 49 for them when both of those players are on the court together. They're absolutely going to be a threat. This is one of those markets where it's an exact market. I don't think the Celtics are going to beat the Suns, so therefore I'm not going to do that for the exact market again. All right, last one. We're going to switch it over to some football. It's been a minute. We're going to do Cincinnati Bengals win the AFC. You can currently get that at plus 500. It is a while until we're going to see some results for this. But Eric, reaction or no action on this one?
Reaction on this one. Now, the Chiefs are obviously the favorites, to win the AFC. Look at their body of work, you can see why. But if the Chiefs aren't winning it, I think the Bengals are a strong contender. Now, here's why. I'm also surprised they just don't have higher odds. But, this is a Bengals team that has Joe Burrow under center, one of the top quarterbacks in the league. They reached the Super Bowl back in 2021. They obviously lost on the final play of that game. They followed that up in 2022 with the trip to the AFC Championship game. Very deep playoff run. They ended up losing in that game, obviously, to the Chiefs. So I still believe the Bengals still need to enhance their offensive line, still an area of opportunity. But the core of this team offensively is still staying together. Plus, you've got the free agency that's coming up in the NFL, the draft. They can still continue to add pieces to this team. And I think they're a legitimate and strong contender in the AFC, so you get reaction on that from me.
All right, I have to go no action on this one, and honestly because the season is just so far away. There's so many different things that could happen in this offseason, but mainly because of the Kansas City Chiefs. I went into this season saying at some point this dynasty is going to seem to fall off a little bit, and then they go on and they win the Super Bowl. So I cannot count them out. The AFC is absolutely loaded and has been loaded, and there's still some really good teams that are going to be back in the mix. For example, you still have the Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Jets might be good if, let's say, they get Aaron Rodgers. We're still waiting to see what happens in terms of that. I just can't back Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who they get right there and just haven't been able to get it done right now, even though it seems like good value at plus 500. All right, Eric, you're going to chill out for a little bit. We're going to talk more football on the show. We're going to bring in our next guest. We're bringing on Katherine Terrell to talk more about what's been going on with the Saints. We know Derek Carr signed with them today. Katherine, thanks so much for joining Bet today. First question for you. Derek Carr met with the Saints while he was technically still with the Raiders. Then we know in Indy they also met up during that combine. What about Carr made this team want to sign him?
Well, obviously the Saints have ties to Carr going all the way back to 2014 when Dennis Allen, who was then with the Raiders, helped draft him and made the decision to start him as a rookie. The Saints have basically played quarterback merry-go-round for the last 2 years, ever since Drew Brees retired. It's clear that they don't fully believe in Jameis Winston, so they think adding Carr can elevate their offense to a level where now they can focus on adding pieces around him. They already have a good defense. They feel like he might be the missing piece to their offense.
And you talk about this merry-go-round with the quarterback situation. What do you think is going to happen with a player like Jameis Winston?
Well, I think that Jameis knows that his days as a starter in New Orleans are probably over. Last week he was doing an interview and said something like, well, technically I'm not a free agent yet. I still have a year left on my contract, but it seems like the Saints have been trying to replace Winston ever since last year. They went after Deshaun Watson. Even a few years ago, they played Taysom Hill over him as Drew Brees' backup, and then they stuck with Andy Dalton this year over Winston, which is something he was very vocally and publicly upset about. So it seems like the door is open for Winston to be released and to go find another team, somewhere maybe he can have a chance to be a starter.
Interesting, yeah, and there's obviously, we have to talk about who is Derek Carr going to be throwing to, because you wrote a piece on .com that Michael Thomas might be moving on, or the team might be moving on from him. So what is the latest in that situation?
Well, I may have been premature on that. I think everybody may have been premature on that. Back in January, they reworked his contract, essentially taking his base salary down to the minimum in exchange for a huge bonus that would become active in March. So everything pointed towards a parting of ways, even though the team said publicly over and over it was just for flexibility. Well, the closer we get to March, the more it seems maybe Michael Thomas isn't going anywhere. Just today, he was retweeting articles about Derek Carr signing, and he tweeted something to the effect of, "Thank you, God." So obviously, he is very excited. We don't know quite what's going to happen yet, but it certainly seems that maybe the door isn't closed for him to come back. Maybe they rework that contract again and pair him up with Chris Olave and Carr to see what their offense can do this year.
See, these are the moments where I love Twitter, because we can finally garner some information from some of these players as to how they feel about things. But thank you so much for joining Bet, and we're hoping to have you on again soon. All right, let's bring back Eric Moody. We got to talk more on this. Now that Derek Carr is signed, what were your initial thoughts? Do you think this is going to make an impact for the Saints? Obviously, it's going to in ways. But do you think now, in terms of sports betting, the NFC South being completely open, do you think they have a shot in this division?
Yeah, I do, Erin. You look at this NFC South division, it is horrendous. So you add Derek Carr to the Saints team, it does make them a front runner in a weak division. And one thing about the Saints, they've been desperately seeking a quarterback since Drew Brees retired over the last 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
It's been dismal over that time frame. They rank near the bottom of the league if you look at completion percentage, passing yards per game, and interception rate. But if you pair a seasoned starter, under center like Carr, and the Saints' stout defense, who ranked 9th in points per game last season, it's really great for the Saints. Now, I know we talked about Michael Thomas. You talked about Thomas briefly a moment ago. A lot of speculation with him. Will he be traded? Will he stay with the team? But I think Chris Olave is the biggest beneficiary here, in my opinion. You look at Olave. He finished with over 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie. You look at Carr last year. He led the league in touchdowns on downfield passes of 30 or more yards. And he also excels at throwing into tight windows. So Olave is excellent at creating separation. He is really going to prosper catching passes from Derek Carr in 2023.
Absolutely. And I feel like from a sports betting perspective, when things like this happen, of course it impacts the futures markets and things like that. We can talk about this. But Eric just makes a good point that this could impact Chris Olave. So what does that mean? It means if you're a fantasy bettor, you should look into that. It means if you're sports betting week to week, that's another player that you can keep an eye on. Maybe its receiving yards will be low the first couple of weeks. You take some of those overs. Either way, they're in a very weak division. I'm talking, this might be the worst division, honestly, in football, looking ahead, because we don't know what's going to happen with any of these teams. It's absolutely wide open, but being that they have a good defense already, that is huge for them. Now Derek Carr just needs to get it done. It got really seedy at the end there for the Raiders, but nonetheless, it is a good move for the Saints.
Yeah.
That division's wide open. We'll continue to talk about that, I'm sure, throughout the entire offseason. All right, we're going to bring in another guest. We're going to continue with our NFL talk here. Eric, you're going to chill for just a little bit. And we're going to bring in Rob Demovsky to talk about Aaron Rodgers and everything that's been going on with him. Rob, thanks for joining Bet today. How you doing?
I'm good, Erin. How are you?
Good. We are excited to have you on. All right, so the GM and Aaron Rodgers, it seems that they're not really talking. Is there any word on Aaron Rodgers talking to the front office or anything like that, or is this conversation just kind of mute for now?
Yeah, right, Erin. As you probably remember last week, General Manager Brian Gutekunst told a group of us at the Combine that they really can't go forward until he and Rodgers sit down and have a conversation. There's been some text message exchanges between the two, but I was told even those aren't exactly prompt replies. So the Combine's just wrapping up today. Believe it or not, the Packers scouts and General Manager Brian Gutekunst took a bus down to Indianapolis from Green Bay, so they should be on their way back today as things wrap up. I would look for that conversation to pick up sometime here in the next couple of days, but as far as it having happened yet, unless something's changed in the last few little bit here, it has not happened yet.
Oh boy, I feel like this is what everybody's anticipating, waiting for, just some type of answer from him. So of course, since we don't have an answer from him, it just feels like there's all this speculation, these rumors. There was a report that came out that the Panthers could even be interested, but then that looks like it was discredited. Are there other teams already reaching out trying to get Aaron Rodgers?
Well, we know that the Jets have interest, right? That's been reported, and it's quite frankly just been obvious. Their owner, Woody Johnson, is desperate for relevancy, I'm told, and really thinks Rodgers can bring that to them. The Raiders, it sounds like, are out. But we asked Brian Gutekunst last week about those trade talks. And look, he could have easily said, I haven't talked to anybody. But what he actually said is, I have conversations with teams all the time. Whether they're actually about trades or not, I'm not really going to say. But then he added, hey, if people thought Aaron Rodgers were available, they would call, right? So very much a non-denial there as far as the trade possibility goes.
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but since you've covered him for so many years, do you think he's going to get traded? Do you think he's going to pick a different team? Or do you think there's potential he retires? Since you've covered him for so long, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I feel fairly safe saying I don't think he's going to retire. Of course, he has the $15 million guaranteed money to play this year. But beyond that, he just doesn't sound like a guy who's ready to walk away. But as for where he plays, Erin, I've got to be honest with you. I talked to one person, and I think one thing. I talked to somebody else with the team or around the league. I think something else. I even go back to talk to the first guy I talked to, and then I think something different than when after I got done talking to him the first time. So at this point, I would not put my money on anything.
That's a good point. Not putting your money on anything, especially in terms of Aaron Rodgers, who, I mean, you cannot get an answer out of this guy, it feels like. But Rob, thank you so much for joining Bet. We hope to have you on soon, and maybe we'll have some clarity on Aaron Rodgers at that point.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to switch it over to the NHL now. We're bringing on Puck Daddy. It has been a while, Puck Daddy, that I felt like since I've asked you some questions that's going on in the league. We're going to start off with that trade deadline. So we know if we take the Bruins out of consideration, what teams do you think improved the most after the trade deadline?
Yeah, for me, it's the Edmonton Oilers. You know, they are not known as the best defensive team. Their goaltending not always reliable, but they picked up Mattias Ekholm from the Nashville Predators, and he could be someone who's a big linchpin back there. They paired him with Evan Bouchard, a young defenseman. He can give you minutes. He can play well on both ends. And despite the fact they had to trade Tyson Barrie off their power play for Ekholm, I don't think a power play with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl is going to suffer all that much without Tyson Barrie there. They'll be okay.
Okay, so I told you to exclude the Bruins, but now I want to talk about them because at some point they were the Stanley Cup favorites. Do you think there's a world in which they can't possibly make the Stanley Cup? They're just so good and so stacked at this point.
Yeah, it's my world. I'm taking the field. You got the three best teams in the league besides the Bruins, right in back of the Bruins. They all play in the East: Carolina, the Devils, and Toronto. You know, number 8 in the league is Tampa Bay. They've been to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals, although they're not playing very well now. They're still Tampa Bay. The Rangers are 9th in the league. They're in the East. Oh, and by the way, there's still a chance the Bruins might have to go through Sidney Crosby in the wild card round to go through the Eastern Conference playoffs. So all due respect to the Bruins, there's a reason the Eastern Conference was an arms race at the trade deadline. These teams think they might have a chance to knock off the best in the league.
I mean, that makes total sense. So let's talk about some of the games that are going on tonight. One of specifically I wanted to ask you about was Edmonton versus Buffalo. Buffalo has won 2 straight. Over-under is currently at 7 goals. What is your favorite play here?
Yeah, my favorite play is actually in the second period. The over-under is 2.5 goals, which might seem like a lot, but the Oilers are the best scoring team in the league in the second period by a wide margin. 16 more goals than the Seattle Kraken in second. Edmonton gives up the third most goals in the second period. Buffalo, they've gone over 1.5 goals in the second period in 15 of their last 18 games. So I'll take the over 2.5 goals in the second period in this game, expecting fireworks overall between these two offensive teams.
Oh, look at that. Puck Daddy really breaking it down to even a second period there. All right, another game. The last game I want to ask you about. Capitals, they're going to LA off Alex Ovechkin, scoring 2 goals on Saturday versus the Sharks. Now, the Kings are a small home favorite. The last time these two faced, we know that Ovechkin had 2 goals. Can I interest you on playing the Capitals on the money line tonight?
I'm staying away from the money line in this one. The Kings make me a little bit worried in this spot because the Caps have been playing well. But what I do like here is the under 6.5 goals. The Capitals are going to roll with the same lineup they had over the weekend against San Jose, which means Darcy Kemper in goal. He's played pretty well for them. Either Kings goalie, I think, is pretty good at keeping the goals against down. So the Caps, even though they were sellers at the deadline, they kind of still have a little bit of a chance at the playoffs. So I expect a tightly played game with both teams looking to grab at least a point here. I'll take the under 6.5 in this one.
All right, I like it. Puck Daddy, thank you so much for joining Bet. As always, I'm sure we'll be catching you on Daily Wager throughout the week. Thanks so much for joining, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. All right, now we're bringing back in Eric Moody. I feel like we're swapping people in and out, in and out, in and out. But Eric, we're going to be here for the rest of the show. NBA, we got a couple games tonight. One specifically I want to talk about is the Celtics versus the Cavs. The Cavs currently laying 8. That total is at 218. The total is dropped. Also, not to mention, last night when these lines opened up, the Cavs were -2.5. It's all the way up to -8. No Horford, no Tatum tonight. What is your favorite play in this game?
Yeah, I would back the Cavaliers to cover the spread, and here's why. I felt like before all this news flow about the Celtics that they were going to be exhausted heading into this game. They had a hard-fought, double overtime game against the Knicks on Sunday night. You had 5 players, Erin, that played at least 39 minutes in that game, along with 3 players playing at least 46 minutes. And so you got the Cavaliers, on the other hand. They're well-rested. They dominated the Pistons on Saturday night. And one thing about the Cavaliers that I like in this game, even more so now with the missing players that you mentioned that the Celtics have, is that the Cavaliers are 21-11-1 against the spread when favored at home, and winning those games by an average margin of 9.5 points. Also, the Cavaliers are 4-1 against the spread in their last 5 games at home against the Celtics. So just given the circumstances and some of those betting trends, I would back the Cavaliers tonight.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'm going to break it down just basically in the same way, just a little bit differently. So I'm going to take the Cavs in the first half, -4.5. I think Boston, you could look at it in 2 ways. One, as of recently, they have not been good whatsoever. In fact, they have lost 3 of their last 4 games, 0-4 against the spread in that stretch of games. The lone win was against the Cavs. But of course, you got to factor in that Jason Tatum played in that, et cetera, some of the players that are going to be playing compared to not. A back-to-back overtime, it just feels like the Cavs are going to jump out on this team. So then you kind of figure and think about player props and things like that. But it's hard in this type of situation when you have a Cavs squad that could go up big in the second half, rest some of their starters in the second half of the game, just considering if they go up big. But then you have the Celtics who, how hard are you going to push your guys tonight? How much do you need this win? I think they're going to come into this one fired up, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to blow out the Cavs who, like Eric had mentioned, are well rested in this one. They're probably going to start off and be really great. So I'd rather look at the first half. Eric makes a lot of sense in terms of laying the 8. I'm not really trusting in the Boston Celtics as of lately. They haven't really given me a reason to. If Jason Tatum was playing in this one, I probably would have grabbed the points, to be honest, because I feel like they need a turnaround game. But at this point, I think it's best just to take the Cavs in the first half, -4.5. Let's switch it over to another game that's on the board. We got the Sixers versus the Pacers. Currently, the Pacers are a 6.5-point dog. That total relatively high, 232. How you playing this one, Eric?
I'm going to go with the player prop in this one, Erin. So I like James Harden to surpass 39.5 points plus assists plus rebounds. So you got Harden here. Very, very favorable matchup. So you look at the Pacers. I'm like, this is a team that ranks 25th in points allowed per 100 possessions. Furthermore, look at Indiana. They allow opponents an effective field goal percentage of 55.1% against them, the 11th highest in the league. Also, you look at this Pacers team, they give up the second most assists per game, and Harden's been playing really well lately. I've liked what he's brought to the table. And if you look at his last 11 games, James Harden has averaged 25.6 points, 9.6 assists, and 5.6 rebounds per game. So I am backing the Beard tonight.
Back in the Beard. James Harden with the par. Okay, I'm going to isolate this to the Sixers side. And by the way, I might have messed up opening this game up a little bit. I meant to say the Pacers were the underdog at +6.5, and that line's actually at +7 now. So that means 76ers are laying 7 points. Nonetheless, I'm looking at the 76ers team total, 119.5, and I'm going to go over this. They've gone over this mark in both games that they faced against the Pacers. One game, they scored 129 points on them. That game went into overtime, 9 points in the overtime. So they were right near that total of what it is at tonight at 120 during regulation, of course. That second game, they had 120 points scored. So yes, we're very lightly going over this team total. But with that being said, this team is completely healthy right now, and they should put up a ton of points on this Pacers defense that's bottom 10 in the league. They've also hit over this mark in the last 2 games. That was against the Mavericks, although they lost. And then, of course, they did it against the Bucks when they got the win over the weekend. They're also well rested on top of that. I couldn't really get a great feel in terms of the spread and things like that, but I will say the Sixers, when they're playing on the road, they have the best offensive rating right now in the league. So it is important to note that they do put up a ton of points when they are on the road, and that's why I'm going to go over 119.5 for their team total. But I do like what you were putting down with James Harden. Another game on the board, we're going to keep going down. Pelicans-Kings. The Kings laying 5.5 points. That total at 235.5. You going with the side, total, player prop, or do you have a few things?
You know what? I'm drawn to a player prop in this one. Domantas Sabonis, over 40.5 points plus assists plus rebounds. You look at Sabonis, I'm like, he's surpassed 40 par in 3 consecutive games now. You look at him in his last 10 games. He's averaged 20.7 points, 6.4 assists, and 12.8 rebounds. One thing about the Pelicans is that they continue to struggle. I can't put it any other way. They've got injuries that they're dealing with. And it's a hard team for me to trust personally on the road. But in this matchup, Sabonis should do very well. Just considering, Jonas Valanciunas was questionable heading into this game. And plus you have Larry Nance, who's already ruled out due to an injury. Because they contained him pretty well in previous games. But with having Nance out and Valanciunas limited or possibly ruled out, I really like Sabonis in this game.
I like that for sure, especially because this total is so high. I'm going to go with the player prop, but look at the Pelicans side despite some of the injuries and things that are going on. I'm going Trey Murphy over 14.5 points. Yeah. Now, when I was deep diving into the previous meeting between these two teams, the one thing that stood out to me was the fact that he had 30 points in 36 minutes of action. This was the most points that he scored the entire season, and of course, it was on this Kings squad. The Kings, by every account, on offense and defense, they are the better team, but I really wasn't a fan of the spread. I wasn't really getting behind the total in this one, so I did want to go to the player prop market just like Eric did. On top of that, when you look at these teams, they do play at a fast pace, and that's why one of the reasons why the total is so high, and they will need other role players to step up, and I just feel like Trey Murphy is that guy. It feels a little low at 14.5. He's gone over this mark in 5 of the last 10 games, but just considering how well he played against the Kings, which, by the way, was 10 games ago, it feels like a low number at 14.5 for his points prop. I'm going to have to take the over on that one. Now, Eric, sometimes on the weekend, you might catch me on SportsCenter, and I do this thing called Erin on the side of caution. I even did it on Daily Wager throughout the NFL season. Something that I cannot get behind. And we know tonight we got the Hawks going against the Miami Heat, and I just can absolutely bet nothing on this game. The Miami Heat have been, honestly, in my eyes, one of the most disappointing teams this season. Their offense is so incredibly atrocious. It is hard to watch. They don't even put up any points, it feels like. Then you got the Hawks, who also I feel like have been kind of up and down all over the map, and we know that these teams have played each other, and Miami's 2-1 straight up and also 2-1 against the spread against Atlanta. But if you look at the last 10 games for these teams, Atlanta's 4-6 against the spread. Miami is 2-8 against the spread. I mean, neither team is good at covering. I don't trust either of these teams, so this is my Erin on the side of caution. I was just curious, Eric, if by any means, have you felt that do you feel compelled at any point during the season to bet the Miami Heat? Because I have struggled continuously trying to find a bet that I ever like when involving a game with the Heat.
No, I'm following everything that you're saying, and I'm smiling because I would stay away from this game, too. I was sitting there thinking of the Nirvana song and Kurt Cobain singing, "Stay away, stay away." I would stay away from this because you look at the Hawks. I'm like, they're 14-18-1 against the spread this season on the road. While the Heat, they haven't been great for bettors either, so I am staying away from this, so I agree with you.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than you can be a bad team and cover the spread a lot. I'm still going to like you. But when you're just not covering and you're not winning and you're just up and down, it's just one of those situations. I cannot get behind it by any means. But Eric, man, it has been fun to do this show with you. It's a little bit of a flashback to the NFL season, but I appreciate you coming on today, giving your NBA insights. So as always, appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining Bet today.
Absolutely. Anytime. Until next time, Erin.
All right, gotta love it. Eric's the best. All right, before I let you go, I do have to talk about some college hoops, guys. March Madness is right around us. Everything's going on. Everyone's getting amped up. It just feels like that time of the season. You know it's March Madness when my mom is making Irish potatoes. I don't know why I feel that way. Maybe you feel that way and your mom makes them, but my mom does. And I had them yesterday. They were delicious. Anywho, we're going to talk BYU versus St. Mary's. St. Mary's is currently laying 7 points. That total is at 128.5. The total really hasn't moved around much. But I'm going to go BYU under 60.5 points. I'm isolating that team total. For starters, these teams have played each other twice. One time BYU went over this mark, one time they didn't. The one time they did, they shot 47% from three, which was an outlier. In fact, if you look at the West Coast Conference, they are the worst team in terms of three-point shooting. So I do want to just isolate this to BYU. It felt like a one-off. And then you got St. Mary's, who's actually a really good team defensively, one of the best in the West Coast Conference as well. So that's going to be my play in college hoops tonight. Again, BYU team total under 60.5. Well, guys, that's a wrap for this edition of Bet. I greatly appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hopefully you make some money off the picks that we gave you throughout the show, and we will see you soon enough right back here on Bet. Bye.